Well, good morning. Thanks for having me. I can remember kind of being in the seat that you're in now. Less cushioning, but same seat, same room, and hearing speakers speak and kind of tuning out. So I hope that that doesn't necessarily happen today. And I just want to say before I get started that what I'm about to share about my life, I just hope that it's a little bit of an encouragement to you, maybe a little bit of a challenge to you. And I hope that you recognize the importance of drawing your strength and your identity from someone other than the people around you or the things that come in front of your eyes, but instead that you recognize that each one of you is made for a great and holy purpose. So with that, I just want to give a little background before I get into the various ministries that I've had the opportunity to align with. I grew up in a stable home. I grew up with two parents who loved me and tried to teach me right from wrong. Religion wasn't really a major aspect of life at home for me. I can remember going to Sunday school, maybe as a 4 or 5 year old, but not much after that. I went to public school through 4th grade. In 5th grade, my parents decided to enroll me in a small Catholic school in the town I grew up in North Plainfield. And I'm not sure if that was simply because they wanted me to experience a little bit more discipline in my life, or if it was because I was pretty small and had a big mouth, so I was getting my butt kicked every day in school. And so maybe it was just an opportunity for me to find a place of safety. But in any event, it was at that point that I was first exposed to a consistent message about faith and about Jesus. And it was there that I decided in 6th grade that I would be baptized Catholic. And then in 8th grade I did confirmation as well. And then I continued on in Catholic school here at Immaculata. As I said, I certainly was exposed to the Word and who Jesus is, but really it wasn't all that interesting to me, honestly. For me, where I found my greatest joy, and really what my church was a baseball field. I loved the game of baseball, and it was really all I wanted to do. I can remember as a young kid sitting on the front porch waiting for my dad to come home from work, and he would come home tired and exhausted, but he would take me out and we'd go out to the field. He would throw to me until my hands bled or his arm couldn't go anymore, and then we would switch spots. And he would catch for me and I would throw every single day. And that sacrifice that he was making for me, kind of sacrificing his body, sacrificing his time with friends or even with my mom, kind of set the stage for how I would respond to things in my life in the future. So if we go back to looking at high school, I really, because I could play, I wasn't very good when I started baseball. In fact, I was terrible. But I worked hard. I wanted it. And so I worked hard every single day. And the result of that was that I began to think that the gifts I had were self-made. That it was just all because I worked hard. It also meant that I kind of drew my identity from the game of baseball, right? So if things were going well, or if people were giving me the right feedback, I felt good. And if things weren't going well, or if somebody critiqued me, it impacted every area of my life. The way that I would respond to people, my mood, my willingness to even do the things that I was expected to do. So my identity was totally wrapped up in that sport. And if I'm honest, that continued into college as well, where I struggled to separate who I was from what I was doing. My senior year of high school, right around, actually in March of my senior year of high school, a girl that I'd been friends with for pretty much all of high school, she was in my homeroom all 4 years, she and I started dating. And it was a feeling I had never quite felt before, spending time with her. And that led to some poor choices for me as well. Not to say that I hadn't made poor choices before, but in spite of her being a good person, we made some poor choices. So when I got to college, my freshman year, I got a phone call from her letting me know that she was pregnant and that the child was mine. And I can remember being scared, mostly of how my father was going to react to the phone call. But I can also remember being ashamed, thinking of all the people that I had let down. My parents, her coaches. And so, we started going through a conversation about, what are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? And I think you all know there's a lot of different options that you can follow in a circumstance like that. The choice we made, after a lot of conversation and some prayer, was to give the child up for adoption. And so we went through a process of selecting a family that had tried for many years to have children and simply couldn't. The day that our child was born, we named him Joseph, which means God will send another. And our hope was that we would continue to have a relationship and at one point have a child that we could raise together. The adoptive couple, who, as I said, had struggled for years to have a child, renamed him Samuel. And that means God has heard us. And I didn't necessarily recognize the significance of that, the significance of God's provision in the midst of a trial or a difficulty. But looking back now, I absolutely see it. That it's not a coincidence that God kind of put his stamp on that child and on our circumstance. Now, in spite of that provision and a recognition years later that God was present, I really struggled after giving up that child. It was a tough time for both myself and for the girl, obviously. At the same time that this was going on, I was down in school. I hurt my arm in a game, and I was shut down from throwing for what they said was an undetermined amount of time. It wasn't certain that I would play again. And that just destroyed me. I remember thinking, okay, so, I'm struggling with this relationship with my girlfriend because she's struggling with the decision we've made and the consequences of our actions. I can't play baseball. 500 miles away from home at a school I don't really want to be at. This is pretty unfair. And that struggle, really took me into a bad place mentally. I spent a lot of time alone, just asking, why me? Why is this happening to me? My sophomore year of college, I decided that I would transfer to a school closer to home. And I thought maybe just a change of scenery would fix things for me. But it didn't. It didn't really. It wasn't until my junior year of college, my girlfriend and I had broken up, right? The weight of the decision we had made was just too much. It was just, you guys can appreciate this, right? That's a lot to take on as an 18, 19-year-old, right? To deal with not just relationship stuff that comes, at that age, but also the weight of the decision we made. Junior year, while we were apart, her family, this girl's family, invited me to church with them on Easter. If I'm honest, I had no interest in going to church, but they encouraged me to do so. And so I sat there almost that entire service, still focused on me and asking the question, like, why? Why is this happening to me? Like, God, if you're so good, why am I experiencing this? And at one point, I distinctly remember thinking, like, why did I have to give up my son? And it was almost as if like a cloud opened up. At that moment, the pastor was sharing a message on God giving his son. Now, comparing that to the situation that we had, like, we gave our son up to somebody else so that he could have a stable home and be in an environment where he could thrive. But that's not what God did, right? God gave his son to die for me, for you, for everyone, right? And it was at that moment that I was like, whoa, like, that's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing because, you know what, like, I get it wrong probably more than I get it right. And still he was willing to do that for me. Now, if I rewind a little bit, the significance of that is that that girl, despite my years in Catholic school where I had heard of God's love, you know, I recognized his love, I recognized the value of living a life that honored that love, but the faith piece of it, the accepting of grace, it didn't really click until shortly after I had started dating that girl, when she shared with me from the book of Romans about grace. And so when she first said it to me, I was like, yeah, I mean, that's easy enough to believe. I can do that. But honestly, like, I looked at it as, it was like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Like, oh, wait, God gives us this grace. He forgives me. All right, I guess I could just keep on doing what I'm doing because all I have to do is ask for forgiveness and it'll go away. But that's not a real relationship. And that's the message she was sharing with me. It wasn't about religion. It was about a relationship. It just didn't click at that moment fully for me. So we go back to that Easter service, and that's when it clicked. Like, God desires a personal relationship with us. And so that was a point when my mindset started to change. Now, to be clear, it wasn't like I figured it all out, all in one fell swoop. Right? There wasn't this expectation that all of a sudden I was going to be perfect, because I never will be. But what it did do is it changed the way that I approached each aspect of my life. So baseball was no longer my identity. It was something I did. Right? It wasn't defining me anymore. Instead, I was defined not by what I do, but by whose I am. So I was able to rehab and play a couple more years. I certainly never competed at the same level that I had before, but I had a greater enjoyment of the game, right? The successes and the failures meant a little bit more because I recognized that it was an opportunity to just use a gift that I had been given, and I wasn't feeling the same pressure to perform, right? There wasn't this expectation internally that I had to be great because that's how people define me. It was no longer that. It also changed my mindset about the way I interact with people. That it wasn't just about a transactional relationship, hey, you do for me, I do for you. It was more of loving somebody because they deserve to be loved. Fortunately, for me, the result of that change in mindset reunited me with that girl. And we started dating with a greater focus on encouraging one another to live in a way that actually honors the faith that we profess. The result of that is that I married the girl, and that we have 3 wonderful children. Well, 2 plus Josh, actually. It's been an incredible journey alongside her. And it's brought me some incredible opportunities, not just to have that faith and to experience the joy of knowing how loved I am by God, but to show others how loved they are. Now again, this doesn't make me perfect, right? Far from it. It doesn't mean that I'm standing up here saying, hey, I'm a really good person, because, I mean, I hope I am, but, you know, I'm I'm just like you guys. I'm just like any other person, right? I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna fall short. But I serve a God who desires to forgive me when I fall short, that knows that I'm a human being, right? And that I'm gonna make wrong choices, but that I don't desire to make those wrong choices. And I desire to use God's word to guide my actions, to guide my thoughts, to guide my words. So as a result of having that focus and changing that mindset, I've had the opportunity to serve in a number of ministries, one of which is a prison ministry. And so I thought about how I had developed this talent on a baseball field, and there were times when I wondered that what was the point if I didn't get to achieve the dream I had of playing that beyond college? Then what was it all for? And it was pretty incredible to see how being able to play that game and understand the game led to me being able to participate in this prison ministry, where we would go into prisons and we would play softball against inmates. We would typically play 2 games against them, and in between the games, we would interact with them. We would one of us would share our life story with them and our faith. Another one would share the gospel message. And then we would take the time to stand alongside these guys and just hear them, let their voice be heard. I can remember the first time I walked into a prison. Nothing can really prepare you for the sound that a gate makes when it shuts behind you in a prison. It's like, okay, well, somebody else completely controls whether I walk back out of here or not. And even though I knew that I was only supposed to be in there for a couple of hours, it was an incredibly sobering thought, just to think about, how solitary it was, that I was, somebody else held the keys to my freedom. And then it made me think about what it must be like to know I'm not leaving that building anytime soon. Right? And so we live in a society where there's got to be consequences for actions, right? And so typically people are in prison because they've done something that violates the rules. And so there has to be a penalty to be paid. But that doesn't exclude them from an eternal freedom. Right? So even though they have this temporal freedom, they have eternal freedom when they know the same Christ that I'm talking about. And the opportunity to share that with the inmates and to allow them to experience dignity, to know that even though their actions have caused others harm, that doesn't exclude them from forgiveness and from God's love. And I can tell you that, sometimes we get caught up in our daily life and we think, oh man, like this sucks, or why do I have to do that, or that's really annoying. Like you get stuck in traffic and you get really annoyed by, the person driving slowly in front of you, and it's inconvenient. And at least for me, sometimes that kind of steals my joy a little bit, right? I get ticked off and I'm like, I want to be somewhere 5 minutes ago, get out of the way. But I've interacted with some men in prison who exude a joy that I can almost not comprehend. And I can tell you that every single one of them that I've interacted with that's had that joy, that it's the result of them knowing whose they are. Knowing that they are loved by God in spite of the choices they've made. And that they have a hope that goes beyond this life. This life is pretty short relative to our eternal existence. And so ministering in those environments, and when I tell you that it is intimidating to be inside some of these prisons, it's rows and rows of razor wire and doors that are several inches thick, and guards that have no desire to be kind or compassionate to these men. It's a scary place to be, and yet they can experience joy. It defies logic. And so I guess in that, I'd encourage you to recognize the dignity of not just the imprisoned, right, but those who have less than you, right? It's pretty easy to kind of judge somebody who, maybe wears torn clothes or that, doesn't have a lunch to bring, right? That it's easy to look down on that person, but it's better to build that person up, right? To recognize that their circumstance doesn't define them, and that a lot of times their circumstance was imposed on them. It wasn't even the result of a choice they made, right? Ms. Hayek said something about the idea of recognizing the dignity of each person, right? That regardless of our circumstance, we all want it. We want to feel some dignity, right? We want to feel appreciated, loved. And so as you interact with others, if you can have that mindset, right? Recognize that even if you are more intelligent or you're better off or maybe you don't do things that are wrong as often as the person next to you, right? That doesn't mean that there isn't somebody better off than you. There's somebody more intelligent than you. There's somebody that does make choices that are poor, less than you, right? And so when we think about that, when we recognize that we're really no better than the person next to us, and that God loves that person as much as he loves you, as much as he loves the person on your other side, it changes your perspective on life. It makes you grateful for what you have. And more importantly, it makes you grateful for who you are. In addition to prison ministry, I've had the opportunity to minister within sport, both at the youth level, the college level, and also at the professional level. And so my time in prison ministry also led me to an opportunity to minister in professional baseball. And so I've served as the chapel leader for the Yankees AA team for now 12 or 13 years. And it's been an incredible opportunity to use those things that, as I said, that I questioned, like, why did I have those experiences? What was the point? And I think the point was to recognize that the gifts we're given aren't just for us. Like, we certainly should enjoy the gifts and the talents that we have, but that they're not just for our enjoyment, right? Ultimately, we're here to serve and to love God. And he gives us grace, but there's this expectation too. No different than a relationship you have with your parents or someone else that you love, right? That when they say I love you, or when you say I love you to somebody else, right? If your actions don't match up with those words, do they mean anything? Right? If you say I love you to someone and then you trash talk them behind their back, or you don't help them out when they have a need, that's not really love, right? It's just words. Well, that's what a relationship with Jesus is all about, right? That when we recognize how much he loves us, and we profess that we're grateful for that we love him as a result, that's where our actions need to match up, right? And Scripture tells us that the way we love him is through loving others, right? So he says, when you cared for the sick, when you clothed the naked, when you visited the imprisoned, you did that to me. It means that the way that we love one another is the way we love him. And so, again, as we talk about the dignity of each person, right, we need to recognize that we are called to love one another. And that doesn't mean that, it's that we ignore when someone offends, right? Or that we, just exist without consequence or judgment, but that we recognize that we fall short as well. And so we seek opportunities to lift one another up, to come alongside someone when they're making poor choices, right? We all have that person in our life where they're like, man, they just make the wrong choice a lot, right? Come alongside them, right? Step up and say, hey, you're not acting the way that you should be. You got to make better decisions, right? Then it's up to them as to whether they're going to listen, right? But we are called to live with one another. And we have to rely on the Lord for the ability to forgive, for the ability to love those tough people in our life. I have a sister-in-law who, for many, many years, dealt with alcohol abuse that eventually, took her. But throughout that process, early on, I was very judgmental, and it became clear that wasn't helping. Some of the best times that I had with her during her struggle were simply when I came alongside her and let her know that there is a reason to get better. There is a reason to overcome this struggle right now. For whatever reason, she wasn't able to overcome it. But I know that there was a sincere gratitude and not being judged for her decisions. Right? Judgment isn't ours, it's the Lord's. Right? And so we should be looking for opportunities to forgive, to encourage, to feed those who don't have food, right? To encourage those who are in a less fortunate circumstance than we are. I tell you all this, again, not because I think I've got it all figured out. I definitely don't. But I do think what I figured out is that the greatest joy that you can experience, and I don't know if this is even something I could have comprehended at 17 or 18, but the greatest joy you can experience is knowing that you are loved by Jesus and that you have a purpose in this life that is for His glory. It's hard to kind of wrap your head around, right? Because there's a lot of information that comes at you every day, and there's a lot of different things that tell you, hey, this will make you happy, or that will make you happy. But happiness is very different than joy, right? Happiness is super temporary, right? And it's just an emotional thing that you feel when you get what you want. But joy is something that is deep in your heart. Like it's just something that lets you know how significant you are in God's plan. And that despite how short you may fall, God can use you for pretty awesome things. And as I said, I'm not perfect. I find myself unqualified to even be standing up here speaking to you. Right? I don't have it all figured out. But I do have a story. And so each one of you has a story too. It might not be obvious what it is yet, but you've got a story. And it's significant. Right? I used to talk about how I came to faith, and I told somebody, I don't feel comfortable standing up and telling somebody about how God's moved in my life. Like, my testimony is pretty ordinary. And they corrected me and said that there's no such thing as an ordinary testimony. That each one of us may be an ordinary person, but that we're touched by an extraordinary God. And that we're here to serve that extraordinary God. And that the way we do it is through sharing our experiences, coming alongside those who may have the same struggle that you once endured. Maybe your experience helps them to avoid the choices that you made. And so I hope that through my sharing of my experience, coming to know Jesus, and also the opportunities to serve Him, I hope that it will encourage you. As I said, maybe it'll even challenge you, right, to consider that what moves you, what drives you, what is your identity tied to? Right? Because, as I said, when I was sitting in a seat much like you guys are today, I definitely didn't recognize that my identity is tied to God, to Jesus. I thought it was all about me. And sometimes I still do, actually, but the reality is that's not true, right? That my identity is tied to who God made me to be. And that's true for you as well. Thank you.
Open the floor up to any questions you might want to ask Mr. Thompson. Maybe I can start, Mr. Thompson, and ask the question. Do you know whatever happened to Samuel?
I do. So when my wife she would send a letter at least once a year, I think twice a year, to the adoptive family, and they would send letters back. They eventually had two children of their own after adopting Sam. When Sam turned 18, he indicated to his adoptive parents that he wanted to meet us. So we got to meet him and spend time with him and his adoptive parents. And then Abby, Josh, and Eli got to meet him as well on a separate visit. And then he came to see a couple of baseball games and hang out with us. And he actually just got married last weekend. And so we got to see pictures of him, thriving in life. And I think the most significant part of meeting Sam is that one of the first things he said to me and to Kristen was thank you. Thank you for choosing to let me live. Thank you for choosing to let me have this life. Right? It wasn't insignificant to him. It wasn't lost on him that not only does he live, but that he was put in a family that loved him and that also reminded him of God's love for him. So yeah, we've had the opportunity to interact with him, and it's been pretty amazing, actually.
Does anyone else?
How did your parents react when you told them that she was pregnant?
They were pissed. My dad, he's a good guy, for sure, but his first words are, well, I probably shouldn't repeat his exact words, but something like, you've ruined your life, and you've probably ruined your opportunity to pursue a baseball career, that you have responsibilities that you need to take care of. My dad, more so than my mom, was not in favor of our decision to give up Sam. He thought that we should figure it out, that we should quit school and raise him. The reason that we didn't do that, well, I guess the reasons to do that were selfish, honestly, right? That there was no guarantee. I mean, we were 18 years old. That, we didn't know whether we'd stick together, and we didn't want to bring him into this world and put him in a situation where, listen, there are a lot of single parents that they're breaking their backs to provide, and they do a great job, right? But there are consequences to living in a household where you have one parent, or where you have parents that are divorced or not together, right? It's not the same. Which isn't to say it can't work and you can't thrive, but it's harder. That's just the way it is. But we didn't want that for him. But we also, we just weren't mature enough to handle what we needed to handle. And it took him a long time, it took my dad a long time to acknowledge that. My wife's parents were much more understanding, thankfully. They didn't kind of look at me as like, this evil guy that was like, oh, you got my daughter pregnant, right? It was not that. Certainly there were some pretty direct conversations, particularly with my father-in-law, but there was this recognition that, like, yeah, I screwed up. We screwed up. We made the wrong choice. But that looking back, he recognized that didn't define me either. Didn't define my wife either. And so, there were definitely some struggles. There was some discipline in terms of, the way that my dad and mom viewed me, and the way that my wife's parents viewed me. But there was some grace in there too. So I'm grateful for that, for sure.
Matt, you always have a question. You got to come.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you. How about, how do you pray? Could you tell us about your prayer life? Do you pray
Well, I couldn't
scripture? Do you pray every morning? What would you recommend to us for prayer?
How do I pray?
Yeah, like, do you have a special prayer time? Do you pray with scripture? What would you recommend us to do to get that personal relationship with Jesus?
You know, I pray a lot. That hasn't always been the case. I think when I was young, I thought that prayer was limited to a pre-set prayer. And I think there's value in that. I think there's absolutely value in prayers that are kind of rote and that we say typically. But I also think there's some pretty significant value in just praying genuinely. God can handle our fears, our worries. He can even handle when we question Him, when we're angry with Him. And so I find that just being genuine. Like, there may not be anyone in this world that you can be genuinely truthful with what's going on in your head or your heart. But God can always handle that. Right? And so I find that sometimes, I have a pretty great relationship with my wife, so I can tell her pretty much anything. But it's not quite the same as when I go to the Lord with those concerns. And it may just be that I know, like, there's a lot of things my wife can't fix for me that I have concerns about, or worries about, or fears, or angst. But I know that God is capable of that. That there's nothing, that doesn't mean He will fix it immediately, right? It's not like a genie in a lamp where I just say, hey, I want this, or I need this, and it happens, right? But when I take those concerns to Him and hand it over to Him, I was just saying, leave it at the foot of the cross. Right? When I leave it there, I can go on knowing that if I'm going to continue to struggle, there's a reason for that struggle. And maybe, just maybe, He will resolve that He just desired me to come to Him with that. And so, what I do find myself doing is praying, whether it's for myself, or maybe it's for the person next to me. Or maybe it's, if I'm in the grocery store and I see a mom with a couple of crying toddlers, I pray for her, I pray for me too, because I don't want to hear that. But I think she doesn't either, right? And so she might be struggling with something, or, somebody, if I know somebody that's struggling in their marriage or struggling with putting food on the table, right? That I find myself just offering up a quick word of prayer, right? That we have these opportunities. Scripture actually tells us to pray without ceasing. That seems pretty hard, right? Like, I don't know that I could pray 24/7, right? But we can certainly strive to pray in those moments when maybe I'd be more inclined to pick up my phone and look at TikTok. Which isn't to say you shouldn't enjoy the things you have, right? But that there are a lot of opportunities to ask God to intercede for those around us, not just ourselves. And so prayer is a pretty significant part of my life. In terms of, and I'm not sure if I understood your question correctly, but in terms of praying when I first came to know Christ, it was simply an acknowledgement that I'm a sinner. Right? We all are sinners. We know that. We don't have to be taught to do wrong. We just kind of innately do things wrong. We go after the stuff we want. Like, it's in us. And so acknowledging that to Him, and acknowledging that there was no way that I could spend eternity with Him without the sacrifice He made for me. Right? That I could never be good enough. That none of us could ever be good enough. Because we're always going to, at some point, make a wrong choice. Right? And that we needed His Son. to serve as that sacrifice so that we could be back in relationship with him. And so that was really the prayer, was just, hey, I'm a sinner. I need you, and I thank you for your son and for dying for me, and then for rising, right? Because each one of us could theoretically be willing to die for the people around us, and that'd be a good thing. Good thing. It would be good of us to do, right? But lots of people have died for other people throughout history. Only one of them rose. Like, only one of them was capable of coming back. And so there's just that recognition that he is who he says he is. And because of that, because of the grace he's shown me, I get eternity with him.
Mr. Thompson, what would you now, looking back on your 17 or 18-year-old self, what would you tell yourself now? The seniors here are all planning their next journey, right? The next step in their journey. And things are heavy on their hearts and weighing on them, and there's excitement and there's, concerns. What would you tell your 17 or 18-year-old self?
I guess, this sounds kind of cliche, but enjoy the moment. People are going to come at you with, hey, you got really big decisions to make, or, this next test will make or break you, or where you go to school is going to decide your future. And there's some truth to that. But I can also tell you that if you make the wrong choice, if you fail that test, it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. Life is going to have its struggles. It's going to have its moments of drama. But at the end of the day, if you're grounded, if you recognize how important you are as an individual, and if you're striving to live the life that you were made to live, it will be okay. Right? That doesn't mean that it will be without future struggles. Right? Just enjoy the people that are around you. Right? I don't know how many of you are close friends or not, and maybe after graduation day, there'll be a bunch of people in this room that you'll never talk to again. Right? But you have an opportunity to leave an indelible mark on each person in this room with the way that you treat them and with the joy that you exude. Right? So I guess maybe don't let the petty stuff or the little stuff get in the way of the big picture. Right? Really enjoy this moment, because life gets a little harder from here. College would be a good time, but it's harder. The academics are harder. If you play a sport, the academics and sports, it's not for the faint of heart. It's like having 2 full-time jobs. And you can enjoy that too, right? But this is the last time that you will have the amount of responsibilities that you have right now. So really enjoy it, right? Find joy in the little moments, and find joy in the people around you.
Anybody else have a question? Well, we just have a few moments left, so if you could just stay where you are and just let's please thank Mr. Thompson for his